The cemetery was already emptying when the weight of the day finally settled into my bones. I stood by my grandmother's grave, hands numb, watching the last cluster of relatives drift toward their cars. That was when Harold Denton stepped close enough that I could smell the starch on his collar. "Your grandmother didn't believe her death would be natural," he murmured, eyes fixed on the ground as if we were sharing a prayer. "If you want to understand why, come to my office tonight, and don't tell your father or Lydia." He didn't wait for my response. He simply turned and walked away, leaving the words to echo louder than the earth being shoveled behind me. The story in the video is a creative work by Revenge Pulse. All characters and events are fictional, crafted to convey a humanistic message and the values of family. I stayed where I was, breathing through the ache in my chest. I had buried my mother years ago. I thought I knew what grief felt like. This was different, sharper, colder, as if someone had slid a blade between my ribs and twisted it slowly. Near the parking lot, my father and Lydia stood apart from the others. They weren't crying. Their voices carried just enough. The timing matters. Lydia pressed, fingers wrapped tightly around her purse. The documents need to be settled before anyone starts asking questions. Father's reply came low and clipped. "I know. Tonight." Then, when they noticed me watching, the conversation vanished. Lydia's smile appeared on cue, smooth, practiced. "Marin, sweetheart, you look exhausted." I nodded and stepped back, suddenly aware of how small I felt between them. On the drive to the house in Springfield, memories kept intruding. My mother's long illness, the way Grandma Judith had moved in after the funeral, insisting that families didn't fracture when things got hard. She had been the one to cook, to listen, to hold us together when everything else fell apart. Inside the living room, a neat stack of papers waited on the coffee table. Father gestured for me to sit. "These are just formalities," he assured me, voice gentle. "Durable power of attorney. Medical decisions, if you ever need help." Lydia hovered behind him. "After everything you've been through since your mom died, this is about protecting you." I flipped through the pages, legal language thick and slippery. One clause caught my eye: temporary incapacity due to emotional distress. My stomach tightened. "I'm not signing anything today," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I need time." Father's jaw tensed. Lydia's smile thinned. "Just a fraction." "Of course. Take all the time you need." Upstairs, in the room Grandma always kept ready for me, I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed. The house felt different now, like it was holding its breath. If you've ever had that moment when trust cracks and you realize the people closest to you might be hiding something dangerous, you know the silence I'm talking about. I lay back and stared at the ceiling, already certain of one thing: I wasn't done listening. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my mother's face surfaced thin, pale, apologetic. She had spent the last year of her life shrinking quietly, as if she didn't want to take up space with her pain. When she died, the house went silent in a way that never fully lifted. Grandma Judith moved in less than a month later. "I won't let the kids drift," she told my father then, setting her suitcase down by the stairs. "Grief doesn't get to scatter a family." Back then, he looked grateful, broken, but grateful. She took over the kitchen without asking, paid the bills when my father forgot, sat with me through the nights when sleep refused to come, when neighbors whispered that it was unusual for a mother-in-law to live with her son-in-law. Judith didn't flinch. "People can talk," she replied once, folding laundry with sharp, efficient hands. "I'm here to keep what's left standing." That version of my father was softer. He used to bring her tea every morning before work, set the cup down like an offering. Lydia hadn't entered our lives yet. It was just the three of us, circling each other carefully, learning how to exist without my mother's voice to guide us. The shift happened slowly. A new job that didn't work out, investments that never paid off. worry lines that cut deeper into my father's face. By the time Lydia arrived, polished, attentive, always watching Grandma had already become part of the foundation of the house. "She keeps us together," my father told Lydia once, during those early months. "I don't know what we'd do without her." I remembered that sentence clearly, sitting alone in my childhood bedroom now. It echoed differently after the funeral. Downstairs. The murmur of voices crept through the floor. Lydia's tone stayed low, controlled. My father responded with fewer words than usual. "She's fragile," Lydia noted. "After losing her mother, and now Judith, it won't be hard to show she needs help." A pause followed. Then, a breath I recognized as hesitation. "We're not taking advantage of her," my father insisted, though the certainty wasn't there. "We're keeping things stable." I pressed my palm against the door, steadying myself. Grandma had moved in to protect us. She had stayed to hold the family together when my mother couldn't anymore. And somewhere along the way, the people she trusted most had started treating care like leverage. By morning, the grief had hardened into something else. I didn't know how far this would go yet, but I knew why Judith had refused to leave, and why she had been so afraid to let go. The papers were waiting when I came downstairs, arranged in a precise stack at the center of the coffee table. Lydia had aligned the corners carefully, as if order alone could make them harmless. My father stood nearby, arms folded, watching me with a patience that felt rehearsed. "We should do this while everything is still calm," Lydia offered, gesturing toward the couch. "No pressure, just clarity." I sat, resisting the urge to pull my hands into my sleeves. The top page was labeled "Durable Power of Attorney." The words blurred for a moment before settling into focus. "This gives you authority over my finances," I noted, turning the page slowly. Father leaned forward. "Only if something happens. It's standard. After what you've been through, it's smart to be prepared." Lydia stepped in closer, her voice softening. "You've lost your mother. Now, Judith. Grief does strange things to people. Marin, we just want to make sure you're protected." I continued reading. Medical decisions, substitute judgment, temporary incapacity due to emotional distress. That phrase, I pointed out, tapping the paragraph. "Who decides when I'm emotionally distressed?" Lydia's smile didn't falter. "Doctors, professionals, not us. But you'd be the ones acting on their opinion," I replied, meeting her gaze. Silence stretched. My father cleared his throat. "Judith would have wanted us to take care of you. She trusted us." The mention of my grandmother landed hard. Judith had trusted him once. Enough to move into this house. Enough to stay. "I'm not signing today," I stated, closing the folder and setting it back on the table. "I need time to understand what this actually gives you control over." Lydia's hand rested on the back of the couch, fingers tightening slightly. "Time can complicate things. Then it can wait." I answered, keeping my voice level. My father looked between us, unease flickering across his face. "Let's not turn this into something it isn't." I stood, the weight of the moment pressing into my chest. That depends on what it already is. As I headed toward the stairs, Lydia called after me, tone still gentle but sharpened underneath. "We're only trying to help. Don't push us away when you need us most." In my room. I closed the door and leaned against it, heart racing. The language in those documents wasn't about care. It was about control, wrapped in concern and sealed with my grief. And somewhere between the signatures they wanted and the trust Judith had placed in them, something had already broken. Judith's house in Cottage Grove smelled faintly of lemon oil and old paper. The furniture sat exactly where she'd left it, untouched, as if the rooms were holding their breath. I moved straight to the hallway cabinet she used to keep locked. The key was still taped behind the light switch. That alone tightened something in my chest. Inside the cabinet, folders were stacked with careful intention. Estate documents, bank statements, a thick envelope labeled Living Trust in my grandmother's precise handwriting. I spread the papers across the dining table, hands steadying as the meaning settled in. The house hadn't been sold. Judith had transferred it into a revocable living trust after my mother died. Her name appeared everywhere that mattered: grantor, trustee, beneficiary. Control stayed with her, protection wrapped tightly around it. A soft laugh escaped me, sharp and humorless. Lydia's urgency, the papers on the coffee table, the talk of incapacity. None of it had been about simplifying things. It had been about access. I pulled open the bottom drawer of the cabinet and found Judith's notebook. The cover was worn, the pages filled edge to edge, dates, short lines, physical symptoms written without drama. Heart racing after breakfast, hands shaking, tea tasted bitter again. One sentence was circled twice. The pen pressed so hard it nearly tore the paper. If I go suddenly, check the tea. My phone buzzed. Father's name flashed across the screen. Did you find what you needed? His voice carried forced lightness. I'm still sorting through things, I replied. Eyes on the trust documents. There's more here than I expected. A pause followed. Judith liked to keep records. She liked to be careful, I corrected. Another silence. Come home soon. Lydia's worried. The line went dead. I sat back and let the truth settle. If I were declared incapacitated, the trust wouldn't protect itself. Control would pass to whoever acted on my behalf. The house, the accounts, everything Judith had worked to shield. I closed the notebook and slid it into my bag. Judith hadn't left chaos behind. She'd left a map before locking the door. I glanced once more at the table where my grandmother used to drink her morning tea. Whatever had happened here hadn't been an accident. And the people waiting for me at home weren't just asking for signatures. They were waiting for permission. Harold Denton's office smelled faintly of old leather and coffee that had been reheated too many times. He didn't offer condolences this time. Instead, he closed the door behind me and gestured toward the chair across from his desk. You found the trust, he observed, reading my face before I said a word. I nodded and placed Judith's notebook on the desk. She didn't sell the house. She was protecting it. And you, he added quietly. He turned and opened a side door. There's someone you need to meet. The man who stepped in was lean, unassuming, with eyes that missed nothing. Harold introduced him as Miles Carter, explaining that Judith had contacted him months earlier. Miles took the chair beside me without ceremony. She came to me because she didn't want to accuse anyone, Miles explained. Voice, even. She wanted answers without tearing her family apart. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were lab summaries, dates highlighted in yellow. Your grandmother sent samples of her tea for private testing. The results weren't definitive, but they weren't clean either. There was an unidentified compound present, something that didn't belong in any herbal blend. My fingers tightened around the folder. She knew. She suspected. Miles corrected. Enough to document every symptom. Enough to plan. Harold leaned forward. Judith amended her estate after your mother passed. The trust was part of that. The house alone is valued at $890,000. And the insurance. Miles continued, unflinching. $1,100,000. Paid out if she died naturally. The numbers pressed in on me, heavy and cold. There's more. He went on. Your father's debts. Nearly $470,000 tied up in failed investments. Judith covered smaller gaps before. This time, she stopped. The room went quiet. I thought of Lydia's careful smile, the papers waiting on the table. The phrase, temporary incapacity, staring back at me in neat print. If they control me, I said slowly, they control the trust. Miles met my gaze. Exactly. The house. The accounts. Everything your grandmother tried to shield. Harold's voice softened. Judith asked me to give you a choice. Walk away and stay safe, or see this through. I closed the folder and pushed it back toward Miles. They're already moving. I don't get to walk away. Miles nodded once. Then you'll need to play along. Let them believe you're breaking. And while they believe that I pressed, a thin smile crossed his face. We gather proof they can't explain away. I stood, the decision settling into place with surprising calm. Judith hadn't left me fear. She'd left preparation, and the people waiting at home weren't counting on resistance. They were counting on silence. I returned home with my shoulders slumped and my voice dulled, the way Lydia seemed to expect grief to look. She watched me from the kitchen, assessing, recalibrating. You look worn down, she observed. That's normal. Anyone would be after everything you've been through. I can't keep fighting paperwork right now, I admitted, letting the words fall heavy. I'll sign, just not tonight. Relief crossed my father's face too quickly to hide. Lydia's expression softened into something almost tender. That's wise. We can do it properly tomorrow. Before either of them could press further, I added, but I want one thing first, a dinner for Judith. Something intentional. No documents. Just family. My father hesitated. Tonight soon. I clarified. Tomorrow evening. I want it to be right. Lydia tilted her head. What did you have in mind? Her roast chicken. I replied. Fresh herbs. The way she liked it. I want to shop for everything myself. The pause that followed was brief, but telling. Lydia smiled again. Then we should all go. Make it meaningful. The drive into downtown Eugene felt longer than usual. I lingered in every aisle, lifting bundles of rosemary and thyme, inhaling slowly. At the meat counter, I asked the clerk about free-range options, about cooking times, about texture. Lydia checked her phone twice. My father cleared his throat. We don't need to make this complicated, he urged. Judith never rushed what mattered, I answered, keeping my tone mild. At the checkout, I remembered something else. She liked that local bakery on 5th, the bread with the cracked crust. We should stop there too. Lydia's fingers tightened around her purse strap. It's out of the way. So was she. I replied quietly, and she still showed up. The bakery stop stretched into another 10 minutes. By the time we turned back toward the house, dusk had settled in. Lydia stared straight ahead, jaw set. My father said nothing. When we pulled into the driveway, the house looked unchanged. That steadiness was its own kind of relief. Upstairs, I closed my bedroom door and sat on the edge of the bed, listening. The faint hum of electronics filtered through the walls. Miles had been efficient. Cameras were in place, one angled toward the kitchen counter, another covering the cabinet where Judith kept her tea. Downstairs, Lydia's voice floated up. She's calmer. She agreed to sign. My father replied, Good. Grief makes people unpredictable. I lay back and stared at the ceiling. Predictable was exactly what they wanted me to be. Later. Lydia knocked once before opening my door. Try to rest. Tomorrow will be easier. I nodded, keeping my gaze unfocused. Thank you for taking care of things. Her eyes lingered, searching for resistance that wasn't there. That's what family does. After she left, I checked my phone. A single message from Miles glowed on the screen. Cameras are live. I slipped Judith's notebook from my bag and placed it on the nightstand. Playing along wasn't surrender. It was timing. And while they believed I was folding inward, the house was finally listening. Morning light barely touched the kitchen when Lydia set the kettle on the stove. She moved with practiced calm, as if routine itself were proof of innocence. My father sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, the screen reflecting in his glasses. You didn't sleep, Lydia noted, measuring tea leaves into the infuser. Your hands are still shaking. Grief doesn't follow schedules. I offered, keeping my eyes on the counter. The kettle clicked off. Lydia poured the water, then turned slightly, blocking the cabinet from view. The camera's angle wasn't perfect from here. I could feel the gap like a held breath. She placed the cup in front of me. Drink. It helps settle your nerves. Steam curled upward. I lifted the cup, paused, then set it down untouched. It's hot. My father glanced up. You should listen to her. I will, I replied, letting the delay stretch. The cup tipped when I shifted in my chair. Tea spilled across the table, pooling near my elbow. I'm sorry, I murmured, already reaching for a towel. I'm clumsy today. Lydia froze for a fraction of a second. Then the smile returned. It's fine. I'll make another. This time, I stood closer. The kettle whistled again. Lydia reached for the tea tin. Then something else, small, white, pinched between her fingers. She turned her back, quick and precise. The camera caught it cleanly. She poured the second cup and slid it toward me. Better I lifted it. The rim touched my lip. My pulse thudded loud enough to drown out the room. I set it down carefully. It tastes different, I observed. Lydia's eyes sharpened. It's the same blend Judith used. My father shifted in his chair. Just drink it. Marin. I didn't. I folded my hands in my lap instead. Steady now. The cup sat between us, steaming, undeniable. Somewhere in the walls, a small red light stayed on, recording every quiet choice. I pushed the cup away. The scrape against the table sounded louder than it should have. That won't be necessary, I said quietly. Lydia's smile tightened. You're being dramatic. Instead of answering, I unlocked my phone and turned the screen toward them. The video filled the space between us. Her hand, the small white pinch, the deliberate movement into the teapot. Clear, unmistakable, color drained from her face. That's not. My father stared at the screen, breath shallow. I didn't think you'd actually do it, he muttered, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Silence followed. Heavy, final. Lydia stepped back. You're twisting this. It was for her anxiety. You heard the doctor. The doctor never prescribed powder, I replied, voice steady, and Judith wrote everything down. Footsteps sounded at the door, firm, measured. When it opened, 2 officers stood there, calm and prepared, a warrant already in hand. Lydia's shoulders collapsed inward. My father didn't move at all. As they were escorted out, he finally looked at me. Regret flickered, too late to matter. I didn't follow them to the door. I stayed where I was, hands flat on the table, watching the steam fade from the untouched cup. The house felt lighter without their voices filling it. Somewhere inside the walls, the camera went silent, its job complete. 9 months later, the courtroom emptied without ceremony. Lydia took a plea. My father didn't. The sentences followed the evidence, not the promises they once made. When it was over, Miles met me on the steps and offered a simple nod. You did what Judith hoped you would, nothing more. Nothing less. I waited a year before touching the trust. Time mattered. Grief shouldn't be rushed into decisions that last longer than anger. When the papers were finalized, I transferred the house to a nonprofit with one condition: it would become transitional housing for women escaping medical and financial coercion. Not a monument, a bridge. In Portland, my place is small and quiet. Judith's teapot sits on the shelf, chipped and clean, empty by choice. On some mornings, I hold it and remember how care can look like control if you don't guard your boundaries, and how love, real love, leaves room to breathe. When people ask how I knew to wait, I tell them this: trust patterns, not words. Protect what matters before you're asked to give it away. And if something in this story resonates with you, if it feels uncomfortably familiar, stay with it. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a thought in the comments. Listening saved me once. Sometimes, it saves us twice.